As we trudge through this life journey, let's not do it anxiously, but be humble, be patient, be grateful, and most of all, let's be thankful for the Almighty, for everything. Thankful for the things that I have, humble with the life I possess. Coming on, some people tried it through with much less. The place you can sleep, the picking and eat, poverty and kick like spear. Time and time them argue about this, time and time them quarrel about that. Never realize the weight you never catch, never satisfy when they think what them got. Know some girl argue about fever, from the world in another city. How much little girl have it tougher than she? Trodden in this world with the cancer disease. So you know, should have grateful, it could have been, it could have you. So you know, should live up full, today for me, tomorrow you. So you know, should have grateful, it could have been, it could have you. So you know, should live up full, today for me, tomorrow you. Thankful for the things that I have, humble with the life I possess. Coming on, some people tried it through with much less. The place we can sleep, the picking and eat, poverty and kick like spear. When you feel your life is cursed, homeless man I said they feel it worse. When you feel your life is hard, Ethiopian babies bad. Complain that the house too small, but I know someone who lose roof and wall. You say the food no right, but I know someone who never nap last night. Claim say the brand know you, know a little you too could have fit the shoe. Free 5-star and first class, but a cardboard box and some live out a cat. Thankful for the things that I have, humble with the life I possess. Coming on, some people tried it through with much less. The place we can sleep, the picking and eat, poverty and kick like spear. Thankful, thankful, humble with the life I
Greetings and welcome yet again to another live broadcast. We are tuning ourselves in right now as we prepare for a illustrious opportunity to share on building legacy. This gives us a moment of reflection, a moment of pause, and of course, a moment of joy as we celebrate our interdisciplinary approaches with voices in action word sound power, and of course, all of the different details in between. I am Sister Dr. ChenziRa Davies Kahina. Most persons call me Dr. Chen. Senate is the sacred term in the meta nature of sacred system. And I am joined by the illustrious, fantastically intelligent activist par excellence, my beloved sister, Sister Dr. Sandra Richards. Yay! Woo!
Oh, blessed greetings, phenomenal African Queen Mother Warrior Senate, Dr. ChenziRa, Davis Kahina. You know, I can't find enough words to build you up, for you to be
Usual.
built up. And you know, this is our way, isn't it? As we build legacy, that we hold each other in such high esteem that we can't find enough words.
Correct, correct. And since, as you say, English is not my first language,
No, you know it's not.
we're just saying, we're just saying. So give it,
So we pulling words and sounds and vibrations together to really communicate the extent to which we hold each other in high regard. And I'm looking forward to our, now English is not my first language,
mm,
our conversations.
mm.
And in particular, our conversations today.
Yes, we are having the opportunity because it's really an opportunity. It's not often that we get in the discussion el- elements in place so that we are able to talk about what's happening in the African world, in the global African world, from a perspective of African Queen Mother warriors. Because most of the explanations, most of the discourse are either from the perspective of those that are responsible for some of the instability and imbalance in the earth, telling us their perceptions of what exists, or we may be involved in discourse. And I say discourse, and I mean it exactly that, where it disconnects our ancestral, ancient African, Nubian, New Cushion, New Kemetu heritage legacy from the very core of what we're talking about. So here on Building Legacies, we spend a significant amount of time highlighting ways in which we look at our conversations, our versations, and this is usually the format that we utilize. So we like to open up with music. We were able to share musical selections with permissions of Mada Nile, one of our international award-winning artists from right here in II St. Croix, and that particular selection, Thankful. And we add that to really shift the vibration so that what we're saying is medicinal, yes, and healing, yes, but still with the fire and the piercing laser like focus of purification. Because some things we're saying, what is it? We may have difficult conversations.
You
And
know that's the truth.
that's it. Ashe.
You know, you know why I find this particular platform and our engagement um, thrilling and stimulating is because of what you say, which is that through our lens, with our voice, unadulterated, undiluted, and without apology, we will be sharing a perspective. As African women in the diaspora, we are going to share and facilitate the sharing
Right.
um, without, without, we're not discriminating, or maybe we are a bit, but
Mm.
we are not working to be um, hostile towards anyone else. We want to love ourselves. That's what we're doing. We're amplifying the love for ourselves. And that is part of how you build legacy. That's how you do cultural transference. You demonstrate the way in which you see the world and not keep running behind the tails, skirt tails, jacket tails of anyone else, and using their reference point as the main reference point, because their reference point isn't good for our health. History shows that, you know. So we want to move from history and bring it into our story.
Right.
That's what we're bringing, our story.
Our story. And see, and our story allows for us to, again, use the music, share those reflections from the cultural artists, the cultural creatives that are actually bringing truth to power, speaking of integrating all aspects of the arts and sciences that govern our womaniverse. And then we're going to also spend some time speaking about things that are happening in the Caribbean Americas, in Eurasia, in Africa, and around the globe. Certain things, sometimes we may just actually put a little treasure piece or a little nugget of information because our intention is to keep our family, our village, our nation, our civilization of ancestral, ancient African, Nubian, New, Christian, New Kemetu heritage legacy keepers, Ankh legacy keepers, in the forefront of this discourse. When we speak of building legacy, that's the legacy we're referencing. And that legacy has been the ancestral space that has facilitated and fed and raised and reared and taught and empowered and enlivened many of the civilizations that are still here today. And we're speaking from a space of millennia upon millennia upon millennia. So I'm very excited to be able to have this versation with you, Sister Queen, for a number of reasons. Because yes, we have these versations off air and we prepare and plan and organize. And I have to thank you publicly for making sure that we don't have these versations off the fly, that everything is based on some preparatory, organized, intellectually stimulating, of course, but from an ancestral sacred space. And I'm very grateful for you bringing your eldership in that regard to this versation. I'm truly eternally grateful.
I give thanks for the opportunity to work with someone as experienced and open to sharing, because you are facilitating this conversation. You are facilitating the platforms. You are facilitating the sharing outside of the interactions that you and I would typically have, so that we can bring our families on whatever platforms they are on, in whatever geographical space they are located, that they can be exposed to some of the interactions of African Queen Mothers around the world.
Yeah.
So we birth civilizations, they come through us. And if we bring ourselves to these situations and these interactions just with our professional heads, there's so much of us we leave behind, you know? So I'm really pushing that personhood, that spirituality, that all aspects of us come to these conversations, so that our birthing aspect is no less important than our intellectual aspect. And you and I are both associated with institutions of higher learning, as well as institutions of academic pursuit. So let me make the distinction there.
Yeah, there is a distinction.
Yes, because we are involved in higher learning. We are also involved in notions of academic pursuit. And in that academic pursuit, often it's patriarchal, it's Eurocentric, it's left brain. Not that there's not any value in that, but we really actually want to bring in the other side, because that's the cultural side, and not just the academic study, but the lived experience, the practice of, the cultural transference to, from ancestral, from elders, through us, into the legacy that we build. So this is particularly exciting for me because not everyone's brave enough to do this. You know, not everyone's brave enough, and you're a warrior. So I am just thrilled to be able to stand, sit, lie down next to you and just say, let's bring it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I acknowledge your contribution, and I acknowledge your highness,
Oh,
your highness.
thanks. It's a reflection. You make it simple, and to have some degree of support and to have authentic support, we're able to have discourse around not only that February is Black History Month, as we've shared in previous broadcasts, and I'm very grateful for this information. Black History Month is really in the Americas, in
And the
the
Caribbean.
Caribbean. And when I say Americas, I'm speaking from the North Pole to the South Pole, because some persons, you say Americas and they only think of the 48 contiguous states of the United States of America. And that is a very limiting scope. And because that's how most of us have been trained, we will actually, from spaces like St. Croix Virgin Islands, we will say the mainland, instead of recognizing that those 48 contiguous states are attached to Canada. They are attached, there's a whole, all different components of Canada and quote unquote British Columbia. And it's really interesting to then look at Central America and see what happens in that area that has a connection, sometimes not as deep as it should, with the Caribbean Isles. And of course, that we're still calling places, we incorporate Suriname, we incorporate Guyana as part of the Caribbean because of the ethnic connections, yet they are geographically located in quote South America. So this gives us an opportunity when we're speaking to globalize this versation around building
I
legacy.
really appreciate that. I really, really, really do. Having been raised in the UK, uh, my perspective of the world was distorted. The notion that, you know, the UK was a united kingdom, first of all, is a lie. The second thing is that Britain is great. You have this Great Britain is also a lie. You know, there are a number of things that are distorted because of who controls the media and who controls the school. So the maps that we were shown showed the United Kingdom as really being enormous within the context of the globe. And when you get to understand how small it actually is, and how insignificant it should be, it's it's mind blowing. So I I would invite you to keep doing what you just did, to not only refresh my mind as I renew, but also to share with our viewers and our listeners who we are and where we are and what it should be called,
Yeah.
because it's a very narrow perspective that many of us have because of our schooling. So
Right.
I'm now out here trying to get educated because I went to school, but my education started, I think, in large part after I left that place called school.
Right.
So uh, please keep doing that so that, you know, I get better. I can recover knowing where we are situated.
Yeah, well, it's really wonderful because what we get to do in our versations here with building legacy is we get an opportunity to do three things. We get an opportunity to have these interdisciplinary discourses and to look at certain historical facts and begin to add a more accurate narrative to how we engage with one another. Two, we get to look at some of the socio-political and socioeconomic realities that impact us and to have some degree of historical context to understand the social constructs. Let me break that down differently. We'd like for people to understand exactly why we're in the situations that we are in and some of the elements that are perpetuating that, some that may come from outside and some that come from inside. so that we can begin to transform and undo and repair.
Yes, repair.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that lends itself to that discourse that we will be sharing a little later in regard to some of the realities that are happening with our sisters and brothers in the Eastern Hemisphere, because we're very quick to talk about the West, the West, the West, and the global powers and the West, and we overlook that there's an entire expansion of the earth beyond the northern ports of America, Central America, the Caribbean, and South America. There's like an entire other half of the globe. And many times we overlook that. So part of our versations and building legacies are going to highlight that. So when we talk about, for example, the United Nations designation of the International Decade for People of African Descent, we're going to have some versations on what transpired that some persons don't even know about IDPAD, and we're in the seventh year. This is something that was put in place from the International Year for People of African Descent in 2011. And then there was some discussion and nurturing and engagement with various non governmental organizations, of which both of us have been involved. And then there was this declaration in 2014, so that the UN General Assembly put this decade forward. So from January 1st, 2015 to December 31st, 2024, the United Nations has designated this decade around promoting the recognition, justice, and development for people of African descent. And there's funding that was attached to that. There were resolutions that have been attached to that. And those are sites that we also, in the body of today's broadcast, will be posting inside of our Facebook space so persons can go and peruse and study and learn and know on their own. Because the question becomes, what are you doing to build legacy? What have you been involved in that facilitates building legacy? And what are some, and we'd love for you to share that. We need to make sure that comes across. We can sit here and we can chat and discuss and show programs and share our slide decks, etc. However, it's always important for us to have your input, to have your perspective, to have your sharing. And we're looking for the sharings that are uplifting, that build the legacy, not tear and dismantle the legacy. We know we have enough of that. We have multiple publications and multiple videos and multiple photographs and audio to speak of what has dismantled the legacy. But we're really working on building that. So when you hear us talk about Black history in the month, you should always ask where. Because granted, in the Americas, it's in February. In UK, it's in October. And of course, they picked a long month, which is great. So it kind of does the opposite of picking the shortest month of February and then having one of the longest months with 31 days in October, and highlighting the achievements, the contributions, the trials and tribulations, and of course, the authentic African futuristic perspective. Notice I slowed down because some persons are accustomed to saying like Afrofuturist. That concept of Afrofuturist, while it was initiated through the works of African persons, it was actually coined and developed as part of a very Eurocentric engagement and intellectual type of paradigm, not even a framework, but just a model. And it has expanded because our people are just so fantastically creative and innovative that it's shifted now to being more grounded in not only activism, but in implementable deliverables, things that you can actually do and see. What are the technologies that have developed that support African futurism? And when we speak of it as African futurism, then we're speaking of it in a very empowering, uplifting, soul and flesh of those that carry illumination and ancestral legacy. That's what we're speaking of, so that we do not just make it a afro, as in the hairstyle, to limit the greatness that it has to our millennia upon millennia of civilization building.
Give thanks. That's an important uh, point to make. We should claim what it is we're discussing. Because when we claim it, we also make a statement about whose perspective it is. If we're talking about Afro anything, those of us who know Afro to be a hairstyle more than anything else will know that the mouth of who it's coming from has a particular perspective. So for instance, in the UK, there is this term, BAME. There is a term for the lumping together of anyone who isn't white or anyone who isn't perceived as white British. So the Black, Asian, minority, ethnic people are BAME. When I hear that term BAME, it tells me something about the person who's speaking. When I hear Afrofuturism, it tells me something about the person who's speaking. I want a level of comfort to come from us claiming our Africanness. I give birth to Africans. I have come through a lineage of Africans. I want that to be declared always. I don't want to be lumped together in some acronym or some academically convenient terminology. I want my identity, my position, and my contribution to the world to be made very clear. So I think we should be using African futurism, and not to be in judgment of those who say Afro,
Right.
because it is a journey. I certainly am on my way in this self-repair effort, this reparation effort. I am on my way. If we are not comfortable stumbling and fumbling a bit when we're in the company of one another, then we are not being empathetic, and we're not being supportive, and we're not learning together. If we are going to say, well, you're using the wrong term. So, because you know, I have stumbled on this platform with versations. I have stumbled, and I expect I'll stumble again, but I know, Queen, you're gonna pick me up, hold me tight, and help me while I recover.
Right.
Until I stand strong. But I'm working on it.
We're all working on it. That's the whole point. We're all navigating how to bring this versation in a space of harmony, greatness, and unity and strength at the same time. So that's part of our ongoing charge and challenge amongst one another. That's not something that happens very easily, and we're relearning, each and every one of us, how to bring that work forward. So we're excited. You know, we've been looking at a couple of pieces and places and spaces. There was a couple of selections that you shared with me. I'm not as familiar with the artist Zephaniah. That was the
Zephaniah.
Benjamin Zephaniah. So I kept saying, I said, okay, well, we're going to make sure that we have all of these pieces together and bring that kind of sound forward. And, you know, I'm always excited when we get a chance to bring this type of discussion around, whether it's ID pad, whether it's looking at the different Independence Days that have transpired, you know, in the region of the Caribbean, whether it's just that we're going to spend some quality time highlighting the way that we celebrate, the way that we embrace one another, because these are the types of versations that help with building legacy. I'm also going to share a little later what was sent to us this morning. Okay, and we are at that point where we can begin to welcome our guests, and just sending some information to our beloved Regal Queen. And
I'm very excited. Can I just say? I'm excitable. You know, it's okay to be excitable and to be excited. I'm excited. Okay. Oh, okay. I'm good. Sorry. Let's continue.
That's a
Our guest, our regal guest.
No, I said, let me play Brother Benjamin Zephaniah's selection. And then on the other side, we will be bringing in our sister queen. Yeah.
Okay, before we play the selection, just to say, this is building on our conversation last time, where we recognize that oftentimes we can have a leaning. So the UK, I'm trying to inject a not a Eurocentric. Oh no, that's not. Cancel, delete. That's not what I'm trying to do. What I'm trying to do is bring in the voice of the African in Europe to our conversations. That's what so that when we speak as family, a global African family, we hear different voices. And at some point, I guess I can share why it is I feel so strongly about this. But as you were, Queen.
As I appreciate love, for some appreciate that you gave that context, because it allows for us to shift things around a bit and listen to some wonderful words, sound, power, and strength. We're going to hear this selection that is definitely building upon in this world and how we embrace building legacy. So enjoy this selection. And on the other side, we will introduce our illustrious regal guest, Sister Queen. I'll even label that as a surprise.
You're doing the technical thing, right? I can't hear any sound yet.
Oh, really? You're not hearing? Oh, we're not hearing our song? I'm hurt. Okay.
No, don't be hurt. Don't be hurt. We're learning.
No, I said, wait a second. I thought that we were on a mission.
You're enjoying it. I was waiting for you.
Right now, I'm sitting here going like this. I said, I thought that you were hearing what we were. I said, okay, so then that means that we're gonna explore another navigation tool of how we can bring that forward, because I think it's important, when we talk about artists and we talk about their sound, their word sound power, that this gives us that opportunity to take it to yet another level. And that's something that I wasn't as familiar with. And so as you said, you are highlighting these conversations on how we bring this world to a certain space. And I'm sitting here saying we're in full accord. And then,
I'm part of the process. I think keeping it real. We're keeping it real. We are bringing these sounds, these cultural warriors, into our conversations, because messaging is really powerful when it comes on top of a cultural warriors, say high science. Our cultural warriors bring together drums and music and rhythm and timing and intonation and stuff to really drive home messages. So that's what we are about. So as you do the technical thing sometimes we have a little glitch and then we fix it, as we do in life, and we continue building legacy. How are we doing?
I'm praying you hear it now.
Yeah. Oh, now I'm not hearing it. I don't hear it when you turn the microphone off. I'm not hearing it. Something is happening here technically.
1 in 4 people live in a state of absolute poverty. 35,000 children die each day because they are born to poor parents.
It's coming in and out for some reason. So
Children maimed by landmines. And when you hear the information which tell you that the world is wired and getting smaller, remember, many people in the world have never made a phone call.
We're going to find another opportunity to pull that in a little differently.
I think so. Because
we have it in several spaces, but you're saying that you're not really hearing it. So we're not 100% clear on why that's happening like that. You know, we got some technology issues sometime, and we're working on it to see if we can navigate. I'm going to see if we can actually show part of the actual video. And maybe if I share that, you can let me just give me a nod if you do hear the sound. So give me a moment so that I can
No
change
problem.
that.
And if we cannot bring our brother Benjamin Zephaniah in that way, we could be a little bit more flexible, and maybe we can bring our illustrious, majestic African Queen Mother warrior guest in, and I will fiddle around and try and see if I can do something at this end.
Right.
Just let me know.
We're waiting for her to tune in. We're just waiting for her to call in so that way we've resent the link, and we're looking forward to her sharing. What I am going to do for a moment is I'm going to pull from this video, because I am comfortable that if I share the sound from here, that actually should work. And let's see how that manifests.
Um,
Can you hear it now? I love this opening because the visual is good. Global building legacy.
We live in a world where 1 in 4 people live in a state of absolute poverty. 35,000 children die each day because they are born to poor parents. Each year, 24,000 people are killed and maimed by landmines. And when you hear the information which telling you that the world is wired and getting smaller, remember, many people in the world have never made a phone call. We live in a world where they say we communicate more, but the world stayed silent when the slave trade was making money. The world stayed silent when the Nazis started to kill trade unionists, people with disabilities, homosexuals, left-handed people and Jews. And now, in the age of the global village and mass communications, the world is staying silent as the Palestinians are being annihilated. Countries are isolated and starved of funds if they do not allow North American burgers to be sold on their high streets, or if they do not allow the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund to dominate and control their poor farmers. We live in a world where over 1 million children each year die as a result of diarrhea. In this world, millions of women spend several hours each day collecting water. Of the 774 million illiterate adults in the world, 2/3 of them are women. More than 60 million girls in our world are forced into marriage before the age of 18. And each year in this world, 358,000 women die from pregnancy or in childbirth. And in this world, more than 100 million women are simply missing. Remember, these women are not even counted. We live in a world where each year multinational oil companies spill oil on the planet, damaging the earth for years to come. In this world, governments back the oil companies and not the planet. to get the oil in this world. Young women and men are sent to fight phony wars. The young people that are lucky enough to make it home are left to suffer physical and mental damage for the rest of their lives. We live in a world where people in uniform can kill innocent people in the knowledge that the corrupt system will protect them. Where whistleblowers that expose corruption, misconduct and illegal activities in governments and faceless organizations become the ones who are persecuted and hunted down. We live in a world where those that expose violations of the law are violated by the law. We live in a world where much of our productive land is given over to cows that are made into the burgers that make some people rich and other people sick. We live in a world where some great creative minds tell you that what they strive for is to receive an award from the establishment. So then the establishment will tell you that these artists are their friends, in the knowledge that these artists are now on their side and not on the side of the people who want to overthrow the establishment. We live in a world where our so-called religious leaders are inciting wars, accumulating great wealth off the backs of their congregations, misusing their power and raping children. We live in a world where money is power and power is money. We live in a world where the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, and the rich who have everything still want more. You don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to see that it's a corrupt world. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to understand that women have not gained liberation because there are the few women in the boardrooms of man-made empires. This world is designed to serve the interest of evil men. But we shall overcome. We shall overcome the greed and the short-sightedness. We shall overcome the selfishness because we care and we don't fear. Yes, sister, we care. We care. We care. We care. But we don't fear. We care. We care. We care. But we don't fear. We care. We care. We care. But we don't fear.
The truth. The truth.
Listen. I'm sitting here, I said, wait a second, I need to add this artist to my next list because you have shared with, well, first and foremost, I'm still in my zone of what he said? He said that twice? Wait, I was like, I had to catch. Okay.
You know, listen, I would like you to introduce our illustrious guest. Before we do that, I am just bubbling over with excitement that she's here. I'm just like, oh my God, this is the real thing.
We're watching you. Well, it's really powerful because a couple of things I need to make sure that I remove all these pins. I would like to make sure that it's on gallery so that everyone can see.
Well, while that's happening, let me just say. So where are we now? This is we are toward the end of the month they called February. And in certain parts of the world, this February is African History Month, Black History Month, some terminology like that in certain parts of the world. Many of us are African Black all year round. Just did you hear what I said? African Black.
More than
all
28 days. Are you sure? Okay.
Yep, it's true. Don't let them know. So, but then in the UK, it's Black History Month, African History Month in October. So twice during a calendar year, we are Black, we are African, and we can celebrate and we can do all of that. The dynamics that have now come to bear because of the climate, which means many of us are on Zoom, actually opens this up. I see this as an opportunity for us to just do the Blackness all over the place outside of those designated months with an international global conversation. I said it. Conversation. I pulled it back. Conversation, give thanks. And so in that process, we can also rupture some other ideas about who Pan-Africanists are, what Pan-Africanists look like, whose name should be called when we're pouring libation, how, what are the qualifications for us being activists? I was in a meeting the other day and there was some scorn poured on the notion that activists would be allowed in the meeting, like frowning on activists. And here we are, 3 activists. I think we're rupturing what activists are usually thought to be, because we're not men, and we're not how, and we're not tired, and we're not dashiki wearing all the while, and we're not, So here we do it. We're gonna birth our legacy.
As we build. So with that being said, it is our illustrious pleasure to be able to share with our viewers, our listeners, another African Queen Mother warrior par excellence, who not only serves in the capacity as a scholar, as an activist, as a mother, as a freedom fighter, more correctly, a freedom warrior, queen, mother. I won't add that. In addition to being involved in media and promotion and development and project management, and the list is quite engaging. And I love this term, a host on Verity Radio. I practiced that one. And we have the opportunity after her completion of her own broadcast on Saturdays. And she will share those details as she brings forward her word, sound, power, and strength. But we are honored to really welcome our illustrious African Queen Mother warrior, Isis Amlak. Welcome to
Wow.
Building.
Greetings, my queen. Wow, what an introduction. I feel honored to be with the illustrious, the glorious African Queen Mothers that are Dr. ChenziRa and Sister Doctor. Always beautiful. And I feel like the sun has come and shined upon me just seeing your beautiful smiles.
Yes, wonderful, wonderful.
It's wonderful to have you here. We've been covering quite a bit to just prepare to set the table, more correctly, the banquet feast space for what we know you will bring in regards to building legacy and sharing some of the realities of what is taking place in the UK, the connections to the African continent, to the Caribbean, the Americas, and of course the world, because that's what we do. All
African.
Absolutely.
True that.
Queen, can I just segue from Benjamin Zephaniah?
Yeah, I was just about to say, I have to give thank you for playing that video. I've not seen that one before, heard that performance of that particular piece. Spectacular.
Yes.
One of the best things I've heard him recite.
But he ends by saying, we care and we no fear. And that is how I see our African Queen Mother warrior, Sister Isis.
Absolutely.
She cares and she no fear. without apology. And I'm now going to be quiet.
So please just share with us some of the work that you already are engaged in, some highlights you would like the viewers and listeners to be more familiar with, and of course, the information so persons can also tune in on Saturdays, because you're brought while we're meeting the second and fourth Saturdays until we get this more engaged. You're doing this every Saturday. And it's important that persons know that on Ferrity Radio in the UK, I just love that part.
Very.
You provide, see, exactly. You know, right? Chops.
You're a word.
Hey.
Energy.
Lovely, lovely.
So yeah, so I do that on a Saturday, 4 to 6 p.m. UK time, or maybe we might call it Babylon time.
Mm.
And yeah, it's called Speak Your Truth Show. And I always say to my viewers that I offer them engaging conversation, eclectic music, and a Pan-African perspective. And just to say, when I say eclectic music, I mean in the context of African. I don't generally play non-African music, so it could be any genre. We are the creators of sound, word, sound, and power. So you know, and yeah, so that's what I've been doing now since last July. I also do a show with a couple of, it's more of a kind of a magazine show with a couple of guys, and it's in my local area. It's like a couple of white guys, and it's more of a local radio to where I live, called Portobello Radio. I do that usually on a Friday at 4 till 6. It's a very different kind of show. That's very much about talking about the issues that are going on in North Kensington. Obviously, Sister Doctor knows the area very well. She was based there once upon a time, and she's done many things. She's had a project running there. In North Kensington is the area also known as Ladbroke Grove, Notting Hill. They have many names for it, and it's probably best known, notably for us as Africans, because it's the home of Notting Hill Carnival. Okay. It takes to the streets every year, apart from last year. So it's known for that. We historically had a huge presence of people of African heritage, from amongst those known as the Windrush generation, i.e. the large migration of Africans into the UK. And we had lots of our people lived in that area. Unfortunately, due to this socio-ethnic cleansing, many of our people have been moved out. We're dwindling in numbers. In the 70s, I read some stats, it was about 75% of the population, in a particular ward, was our people. Not now. We're being pushed out. It's also the home of where the Grenfell Tower was, where at least 72 members of my community were institutionally murdered through an act of atrocity and neglect. And, you know, very much around this whole socio-ethnic cleansing thing by various bodies, including the local authority who were responsible, the TMO, various companies that provided shoddy goods. There's a whole story there. So again, it's known for Grenfell. So in terms of what I do, I've been in the area for like about 30 years. I'm originally from Trinidad, but when I remember when I was telling somebody, when I first went to, you know, sounds like that Lenny Henry, when I first come to England, but when I first came to Notting Hill for Carnival, I was about 15, so in the early 80s. Mm-hmm. I remember sitting on a wasteland that's now a park, or the wasteland at the time. Everybody was just chilled out, smoking a spliff, you know, having an underage drink and all of that, looking around me, and all I could see was people that looked like me. Because I was living in a really middle-class white area. Okay. And, you know, I never really settled in that place. I was just taken there by obviously it wasn't my choice, my mother and my stepfather. I remember looking around, seeing all these Rasta men and people walking. And I will never forget looking around and saying, this is where I want to live. And that is where I ended up. And it's that thing that we say, we speak into being. And I think somewhere, I know I spoke that into being. And I came into the area and ended up staying. And I've been kind of lived there now longer, like than most places in my life, because I did a lot of traveling as a young person. And yeah, Notting Hill, Ladbroke Grove, I really feel like, I've never felt that England is my country. I'm an African from Trinidad, but I feel that this is my end with a Z, you know?
Okay.
So yeah, I've been involved in a lot of activism and what you call local democracy, and involved in the voluntary sector and community work in my area, particularly, but in other parts of the UK as well, but mainly in the area. So most recently, I was involved in a campaign where we're trying to save 37 trees from being cut down on
Okay.
called Warnington Estate, because in North Kensington, it's historically was a working class area. There's not as much green space as in the south of the borough, which is the rich white area, and they're destroying an estate. They're going to rebuild, but what they're going to do is they're going to reduce the number of social houses and put all these private houses.
Oh.
They're looking for like £600,000 for a one-bedroom flat, a little box in a block. Are people, ordinary people, not just people of African heritage, who have historically been impoverished through the institutionally racist system in the UK, but also working class communities, other minoritized and racialized communities can't afford those rents. Then it's invaded by rich white people, the hipsters, and these sort of people. It changes the whole dynamic of the area. The shops that we would have, the things that we would do, everything gets taken away. And I'll forget, and I'll shut up after this. My uncle, and you met him, Sister Doctor, when we were in New York, and he was telling me that him and his partner, my uncle's been in the States since he left Trinidad in the 50s. So, when I was a child, I spent a lot of time with him in Brooklyn, and then he moved to Jamaica, Queens, which is where you came, Sister Doctor, and where we had that conference. And he would go back. He's always hanging out in Brooklyn. And he said there was a particular area where they used to be brothers, and they'd be playing their djembes every Sunday in the park, and everybody gathering. That New York vibe. It got gentrified. The white people started to come in. Next thing, they're complaining to the city council about the drumming. And the next thing, police came. The city council put down some, I don't know, edict or something, and that was the end of it. And that is exactly the type of thing that happens. So, yeah, I've been fighting and challenging a lot of that sort of thing in my area. And I've also obviously got a history as a reparations activist and an anti-apartheid activist in the 80s. And yeah, that's me really.
Well, we're grateful for you sharing that, and I really would like for you to expand on the current protest component and or the concerns, what you're talking about in terms of that gentrification and what we've shifted. Like here in the Caribbean, people, they're like, it can't be gentrification because it's us coming in, but it's not really us. It's people that are becoming, that are identifying with that term local. Like local means you could be here for 28 days, have some type of identification, and then you're part of the community, not having a vested long-term interest and commitment to the community. So what we've done is we really shift in regard to speaking of persons as native, indigenous connectors and residents and so forth. Because again, you may not be born in a place, however, you are giving your work, your sweat, your blood, your tears to a place authentically, and that has value. Yes. I would love for you to share some of it because we read things in the newspapers. And when we say the newspapers, we're talking digital media papers. And many times there is this invisibility of what is happening with the African communities, for example, because most persons see UK, and with a few exceptions of, whatever the Queen and the court are doing, that's kind of what is highlighted. Not, Brexit kind of showed a little something in terms of, oh, there's a concern amongst the royals in Britain. And then there's what you all say and what you all have brought so that the global African family village community, nation, civilization can know some of the authentic things that are happening, because that type of, I consider it depopulation, because what's happening is they are literally doing that term, republis, the root of republic, in Latin refers to repeopling a space. So when they were in that colonial vibration of creating these repeopling spaces and then declaring it as a republic, it wasn't the way that we look at a republic, thinking there's some degree of democracy and central engagement and respect for the people, but they are repopulating our sacred spaces. They're repopulating even the spaces we've called home, as you've so eloquently shared with us. So I would love for you to expand on that and give us that proper term. Is it Granville, you say?
Grenfell.
Grenville, thank you.
Well, it's interesting because there's a whole history of this depopulation, as you call it, this removal and erasure of people. So it's interesting again that there's a concept, a notion of England. I think I described it to you, Sister Doctor, as the old Cadbury's chocolate box with a drawing of a beautiful cottage with all these green fields and happy looking people. And this is the kind of England, the story, the notion, the narrative, the fiction that we were fed as former colonized people in Trinidad, in Barbados, in Jamaica, in Antigua, St. Vincent, all those islands that we found ourselves on. When we first started to migrate up to England, there was this notion of the streets paved with gold, and it would be wonderful and spectacular. And, if you read the literature of people who migrated from our community to England, they literally got off those trains and were like, it was a shock. The place was gray. The place was dirty. The people were gray. The people were dirty.
My queen, my childhood, when I go inside, is in black and white. I see the houses, I see the big chimneys with all of the smoke and stuff coming from it, and the whole place is grey and it's in black and white.
Yeah. And just every lack of color, the hygiene issues. I mean, when I first came to England, I remember my mother and my aunties saying, oh yeah, these people, they don't know how to wash, they don't use disinfectant. I mean, it was, and I had an uncle that told me that when the English would come to Trinidad, you'd always know when they arrived because they used to stink. They literally didn't smell good. And it would take a few weeks for them to get used to a washing routine. Now, of course, times have moved on. They know how to clean themselves, but there's stories about, and in the 40s and 50s, bread would be delivered to the house and put on a doorstep unwrapped.
Yes.
And it was because of the Caribbean people refusing to eat it that they had to change and actually bag things.
And fish and chips in newspapers, old newspapers, fish and chips, just in the newspaper.
Yeah. So England was never ever that chocolate box. There's a really great book called The English, and it's written, and I will remember the name, I'll pull it off my shelf. It's written by an Englishman. It's always good to read the history of white people when they actually are honest about their own history, because they might not believe it when our scholars write stuff. Oh, well, let's dismiss Sheikh Anta Diop, let's dismiss Walter Rodney, let's dismiss, this one, but John Heinrich Clark, oh, these people are, African centrics or whatever. But when their own white people write these stories and say, well, actually, this is nonsense. It was never like this. England was always a small 1% who had everything, and the majority were poor and, suffering. So, yeah. So in the context of that, the area that I live in and the area where Grenfell is, and many other areas in England were, they were dreary and they were in a terrible state. And after the Second European Tribal War, when a lot of our people started to come here, there was, it was being reconstructed. The place had been mashed up by bombs, and there was like children playing on bombed out sites. And if there's any honesty, they will acknowledge that our community, African people from the Caribbean, rebuilt England. We came here and we built up a broken country. We brought nurses, we brought bus drivers, we brought people who were overqualified for jobs, who then, because of racism, took lesser jobs than was equivalent to their ability, but excelled in those roles. And not only did we do that, we brought our vibe and our culture. And that is why places like Brixton and Peckham and certain parts of Hackney and Notting Hill were like the vibesy places. The jazz music was happening, the reggae was happening, the blues parties were happening. Mm-hmm. And this is like our own success that is being used against us. So in the context of Notting Hill, There was a time when the rich white people didn't want to live in the inner cities, didn't want to live in Brixton and Peckham and all they were out in the suburbs. And then things changed, and then finance and economics, and it all became about the city. And so they wanted to move back in. And then, of course, they would also look over and see, well, look, there's the carnival in Notting Hill. There's these cool rastas hanging on All Saints Road. There's reggae music playing. There's food cooking. And they wanted a part of that. And so they started to come back into the inner cities. I'll never forget Brixton Market. Sister Doctor, I don't know the last time you were in Brixton Market, but for a long time I hadn't been to Brixton Market. And about 10 years ago, this was when they really gentrified it. I went there having not been there for 4 years. And I swear to you, this is a market that used to be thriving with people that look like us. Hard food selling, all things that, and I walked in there and I was like, you know, when you just like think
Where am I? Where am I? Yes.
Literally, I was like this.
Yes.
Wow.
Because
Yeah.
sourdough pizza places, hipsters
Yeah.
everywhere, all this sort of like really like white kind of stuff that was like, what happened?
And the occasional African shop, one or two African shops, and maybe some yam selling maybe there, and maybe some African fabric selling there, but Chinese people selling African fabric in a big shop, very, very transformed, and African people once again displayed.
And that's kind of what happened everywhere, and it's happened a lot in Notting Hill. So whereas our population, our people built the vibe in Notting Hill, it's been totally, what's the word? It's completely being wiped out. It's being changed. I mean, people still want to use it. They want to use the name, the carnival. They want to use this to sell, you know, to as a product. They want to package it and sell it. But the authentic people, there's like a chain of restaurants, and they're owned by white people. They're called something like Rum Kitchen or something. And I think there's another one called something else. And what they're doing is they're packaging us and selling it. Mm-hmm. So they'll sell you fake Caribbean food, really, because it's Caribbean food made. They might employ a chef, but they've packaged it. They'll do it up and make it like a patty and bun or something. And they'll change it into a, you know, a kind of a Eurocentric version. Mm-hmm. And then they'll sell it for X amount of money off our back. They'll get a jerk chicken recipe and turn it into, you know, it's that kind of stuff that's going on. And that's the context in which Grenfell happened. Mm. Basically, you've got a tower block, home to a vast community of working class people and people from minoritized communities, Eritreans, Ethiopians, Caribbean, Irish, Moroccan, Sudanese, you know, lots and lots of Filipino. Most of these people are not rich and white. The local authority has outsourced all its control of the property to this thing called the Tenants Management Organization, who are completely hopeless and don't manage a property properly. The people are complaining about the lack of services, about the fact that the corridors aren't safe, that the sprinkle system isn't working, that whole plethora of things. They're not being listened to. They get threatened by the council, or that, you know, we're going to take you to court or do whatever because you're causing trouble. They then decide they want to put cladding on the building. And the purpose for putting the cladding on the building wasn't because they cared about the people in the building. It's because they were trying to develop an area across the road, which is called Westfield, which is a big shopping centre. They've got one in East London as well. And they're trying to gentrify the area. So they want to put this stuff on the building to make it look more desirable for rich people to move in. Okay, so they then put this cladding on. But of course, because they don't care, and because this country has devastated any form of environmental and building regulations and protections, the material that they use is not fit for purpose. Mm-hmm. Communities are complaining and saying, we don't want this cladding on there. Furthermore, they build a school right in front of the building. There used to be a big space, like my daughter used to play football and stuff with her friends under there. And, you know, a lot of people in the community all said, we don't want a school right blocking the building. It's not a good use of the space. It's not going to be safe. Anyway, people weren't listened to. The local authority signed off with the TMO on material that was not fit for purpose, this cladding, which was described as like pouring petrol on the outside of the building. Its flammability. And what happened was on the 14th of June in 2017, there was an electrical fire in an apartment, and instead of how it would have been like the other buildings that aren't clad, where you could block off and lock off a building and control a fire, because of this cladding and the insulation materials, this caught fire and it literally sent flames running up the side of the building. At least 72 people died. It was a horror show. People are still, up to now, there are, I mean, I can't, you know, I still can't even completely explain what it was like to be in North Kensington. I stepped out of my door about 8 in the morning, the fire, like, walked around the corner because you can see the building and it's, you know, still smoke coming off it. And then people that I know were looking for people that were missing, and, you know, all sorts of terrible things, and people died, and people that I knew didn't know. I mean, luckily, I give thanks, I didn't know anyone closely, but a lot of people I know were severely traumatized. The area was invaded. We had cameras and people coming in, and, you know, we set up our own kind of humanitarian aid centers because the council couldn't be trusted to do the work for the people. All sorts of things happened. It was like living in a different universe, in a multiverse of like, yeah. And so that's the result. And now we're trying to get justice for those, at least 72. We know, furthermore, we know more people died, but some people that live in buildings are undocumented. There is no record of them.
Right, so we have to step forward. That's rightfully noted. And for the viewers that are curious on what you're seeing some of the actual imagery of what took place in June 2017 in the Grenfell Towers in UK.
Yeah.
And you could just, like a matchbox, it just looked like everything just was completely consumed. I mean, that there were any survivors is definitely a blessing.
Yes, I mean, we have to give thanks and praises for that. I mean, and one of the saddest things is, I think it was the October before, the community, the Grenfell Action Group, which was a blog run by a couple of bloggers, one of them who's Ed Duffin, who's an amazing guy. He survived just about survived that fire. They had put out a post saying, look, there's going to be a fire. This is not safe. The building is not fit for purpose. And they were ignored. They were treated as like conspiracy theorists and extremists, and like you said, like activists, you know, like we're supposed to be some bad people and all these people. And they were ignored. And they predicted exactly what would happen. And yeah, people didn't want it, didn't want this cladding, and this is what happened. People were killed. And, you know, just to show you the impact of when you move people. So a few days before that, we were lucky enough that we had a new MP elected for Kensington and Chelsea, the first time ever in 100 and something years. We had a Labour MP. Her name's Emma Dent-Code. She's like, you know, an English woman. She's from the local community. She's very engaged in the community. And there was literally people celebrating on the streets. We were so happy. And a few days later, they burnt down, you know, Grenfell burnt down. And at the next election, Emma lost her seat. And we've got some just awful, nasty Tory MP woman in now. And one of the things I realized quite immediately was that a large reason why Emma lost her seat was because when that building burnt down, over 300 of people that would have been in that building that would have voted for somebody from our local community, they were no longer there. Some of them were dead. They were all displaced. So that's the difference. That's gerrymandering. It's an American system that they use, you know, to manipulate elections. But that's what it is. That's exactly what you do. When you socially, ethnically cleanse people out of your area, you change a political dynamic. The color changes from, well, in America, it's red and blue is the opposite to us in the UK, but you can change it from a more social type of government to a more right-wing, racist, extremist government. And that's kind of, you know, that locally happened. So that's just an example. I mean, there's so much more I could say about Grenfell. It's endless, but yeah.
This was the picture that stuck out for me, that 2 years after Grenfell, this building still has no sprinklers.
And it's the same
And
for
that,
lots of people.
yeah, that's very important. Like that was the shocking because, again, you hear about this and they didn't discuss the fact there was a significant amount of asbestos. And in 2017, there were already international protocols and building codes that defined that there was no longer to be asbestos in any building that had human and, any humans living in the facility. That's like globally. That wasn't like a US thing or a Caribbean thing. That was a international building code that was supposed to be engaged. And so that in of itself, because then we're talking about the after effect of that fire and what that, that there was no, what here is known as like lead based abatement or any type of asbestos, the aftermath that this could or has created is just unconscionable. So that's why it's important for persons to get that visual in your mindset. This wasn't just an isolated situation. This was something that was going on for some time. The tenants were raising their concerns. It affected, as you said, the political outcomes of elections. It affected having safe and appropriate housing and just that sense of community for brothers and sisters that were coming from different parts of the African and global spaces and no longer having a place to reside. And this cladding, that seems even more crazy because when you do these refurbishments to any establishment, those issues of safety and protection, that should have been even more of a reason that that material should not have been done because we're talking 21st century. That's almost seemingly quite intentional. So I am grateful that you were able to just share with us a little bit. Like you said, this could be a whole broadcast in of itself, and we desire to move on to other areas as well. This just takes a toll because it's important that this information gets out. A lot of persons didn't know what happened. Persons were made in certain, I can speak for what was reported here in the Caribbean Americas, specifically in this US based kind of environment between Puerto Rico and here. And it was that it was some type of arson and or there was some negligence on the part of the residents in the building. They didn't really explain this cladding. They didn't explain that there were these reports. They didn't explain that there were these issues with the electrical system that should have been addressed or that there was insufficient sprinkler systems. So you're just shedding so much light, African Queen, Mother Warrior Isis. I'm grateful.
And I just want to shout out and mention that in the fire, we lost Khadija Say, who was a young woman of Gambian heritage. And she was an aspiring, an incredible photographer. She just had her work shown at the Vienna Biennial. And her mother, Mary Mendy, they both perished in the fire. There's an exhibition of Khadija's work at the British Library. And my sister, and your sister too, Sister Dr. ChenziRa, Khadija Sete, the poet and publisher, has been kind of championing her work. But that just shows you we lost a great talent and a beautiful shining star of Africa in that fire. Amongst other, there's the losses are tremendous, but I just want to shout out particularly because these were Gambian women and these were our African sisters who died unnecessarily in a negligent fire.
Well, I move fast, so I'm going to share what I found even in regard to her obituary. I think it's important that people know that our sister is speaking truth to power, and this is from the 1854 photography space, and it highlights what transpired with our beloved sister Khadija saying and her passing, but more importantly, in addition to family and so forth, but just look at this awesome piece of a self-portrait.
Her
Wow.
work is beautiful. really, really spectacular. And you know, when you see pictures of her smiling and stuff, that smile just, you know, beautiful. Anyway, just the horror of it all.
Well, no, but thank you for just offering that context and that clarity of what took place. And thank you, Sister Dr. Sandra, for also putting up. You see how the synergy is? We didn't prepare to put up the same picture, and we still put up the same picture. That's how we operate.
We work in synergy and harmony. Give thanks. You know, one of the things that just came out of what how Senate Dr. ChenziRa responded is that it almost looks like it was intentional. It almost looks like it was intentional. We are so generous. We are so, you know, we operate from a place of, surely that cannot be the case. It wouldn't have been intentional. But it almost looks like it was intentional. And I don't know, African Queen Mother Warrior, Isis, if you're able to say anything about Colin Roach and Mark Duggan and the New Crossfire. These kinds of things. I mean, are you familiar with these, Senate Dr. ChenziRa? Are you familiar with any of these incidents?
I am familiar only in regard to seeing reports passed across our news correspondent desk, and I'm learning more because even in hearing what African Queen Mother Warrior Isis has just shared about Grenfell, I think it's powerful to see what was in the quote Guardian yesterday about now there's an apology of putting profits before people on this same issue. And it starts to speak to what's happening in other buildings, other spaces where there are large populations of people of African ancestry and others, and just saying sorry. They actually are saying sorry for series of property deals made before the 2017 fire that led to the negligence that resulted in the death of more than 72 people by record. And we're sure more passed that just were not documented, as you said earlier. And the fact that they are carrying this particular article, one part that stuck out as I'm listening was just the fact that before 2017, the council did not find the right balance between financial benefits and social benefits. Too often, the council put the narrow goal of generating commercial income above the broader aim of delivering benefits to our wider community. We fell below the bar on consultation, transparency, scrutiny, and policy. We cannot say hand on heart that residents were involved every step of the way, or that the council put their interests first and foremost. And for that, we apologize. And an apology without a change of behavior is futile.
I was going to say that. I was going to say just that. Queen, you and I just, I love you.
Love you as well.
You know, this is the thing, and that's why I mentioned Colin Roach and Mark, because the sorry. I think in the Caribbean, in Jamaica, I think they say, I'm probably going to get this wrong, but I think they say something like, sorry can't buy soldier Larry, something like that. Like, if you are saying sorry, but you're not doing anything any different. And historically, it would appear that sorry has meant a lot to African people. Like, oh, well, they did say sorry. Especially those of us who have been, immersed in a religious environment where you're supposed to forgive. Somebody slap you, you turn the other cheek. I suggest anybody who slaps me does not turn the other cheek. I would like to suggest anybody who slapped me, I want my voice to go viral. Anybody who slapped me, do not imagine because I am being polite that I'm not going to slap you back. You understand? I am going to slap, even if they arrest me and take away my liberty, I am going, do not slap me and do not tell me sorry and keep slapping me. You do not mean sorry if you keep doing it. That's why I said, I mentioned those other things, and maybe African Queen Mother Warrior, I don't know if you know about these other incidents, but I was just picking up on the idea that Senate Dr. ChenziRa said that it almost looks like it's intentional. Please, please, I'm trying to let the world know.
Well,
These
it
things
has to
are
stop.
accidents.
Yeah, but it has to stop. Like what we're saying to those that may not, because again, we can be polite and we are not sanitizing the conversation. We're just making sure that persons can hear the pierced laser-like fire with intention, sacred intention, of course, so that persons recognize that what come up no, me not turn my face when you slap me. There's no cheek, no. The cheek done.
Burying our children. We're tired of burying our children or our siblings or our loved ones, and nobody is being held responsible for any of it. I just need to reel myself back in. African Queen Mother Warrior Isis, do you have any thoughts?
So my first thought is that I would go with the philosophy of an eye for an eye. So if you're bold-faced enough to slap me, I'm not even going to slap you. I'm going to kick you down. First off, I'm going to drop you.
We're tired. We're
Put your hand on me. I mean, you can say whatever you like to me, but do not ever put your hand on me. I will use whatever means I have to lick you down. That's the first thing. And then the second thing, coming back to the point about the intent. You know, when I walked out of my building and I looked at the burning Grenfell Tower, well, the smoke was coming off it, the fire had gone out, the smoking Grenfell Tower. The first thought that went through my mind, I will never forget this, was, oh, they did it then, they burnt it down. And my first thought was R.B. Casey burnt down Grenfell Tower. That literally was, I swear down, as we say, that was my first thought. And it was just literally the first thing that came to my mind. And, you know, ultimately, that's prime retail. I mean, not real estate, not retail. That's prime real estate for RBKC. So one has to wonder, you know, Rockfielding Mellon, who was responsible for this, who's run off into hiding, the little rich white boy, little Lord, whatever he's called, he was the one who pushed this through. And to people like him, they benefit from this. All the other people, like Robert Black, who was the head of the TMO, and Nicholas Paget Brown, who was the leader of the council at the time, these people have obviously, they've all kind of run away and they're all hiding and, you know, whatever else. But they, despite all the opposition, they went ahead with this. And when I was studying law, and I was saying this the other night, that there's a thing where if someone is so reckless, like so extremely reckless, you can imply intent. It's more or less the meaning. Because if I'm so reckless in my behavior that I lick down somebody with a car or bicycle or scooter or something, there's an extent to which, well, if my behavior was so thoughtless, so reckless, then it was intentional. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So you can almost imply intent from really reckless behavior. What happened with Grenfell, I would say, was so incredibly reckless that it was intent. So coming back to what we were saying. And to come back now to the names that you called, Sister Doctor, who are now our ancestors. The 1981 New Cross massacre, in which 13 young people were burnt to death, 13 of our young African people at a 16th birthday party. And one committed suicide afterwards. So we say 14 dead now, don't we? 13 dead, nothing said was a chant. I was young then, and I remember that. But, you know, for some of my elders, it was even more profound because they were in their, you know, like an ex of mine, he went on the demos and he was in his 20s. And to hear something like that, you know, our young people, and the way it was treated, again, the police knew that it was a racist attack. There was a witness saying, there were witnesses, multiple witnesses who saw some white guy throw something which was believed to be a petrol bomb. And they dismissed all that, pretended, you know, whitewashed it, that it wasn't a racist attack, and didn't investigate properly. When those young people ordinarily when there's a tragedy like that, the Prime Minister, I mean, at the time it was the thing, that evil witch of a thing, may it burn in hell, Thatcher, that thing was in power at the time, and it didn't even...
Evil witch of a thing, is that what you just said?
Yeah, thing. I'm not gonna genderize it. It was a thing. And it didn't give any apology to the, or any sign, you know, not apology, what's the word, condolences, sorry. There were no condolences given to the family. It was totally dismissed. And then a short time afterwards, I think it was either in Scotland or Wales, there was a tragedy involving, and you know, there was all the condolences and stuff. So what they were saying to us is that our life was not valued. When our people die, we're not valued. We have no value. And it's very reminiscent of the many miscarriages of justice where racism rules. So like, again, coming back to my area, because I know my ends well and I do a lot of local history stuff, but on the 17th of May 1959, Kelso Cochrane was murdered on Goulburn Road and Southam Street. He was a young 32-year-old Antiguan brother. He had come up to England to save up money to study law. He was working as a carpenter and he'd hurt his hand and went to Paddington General Hospital. He's on his way back home with hand band up. A group of white thugs came out, drunk or whatever, from the pub and stabbed him with a blade. It went through his heart and he was killed. Again, institutional racism. They didn't investigate the case properly. They put two of the suspects in a cell next to each other so they could talk and fix up their story. People told them in the community, you know, that they suspected it was a certain person, but the police wouldn't do it. All the white people knew, but they wouldn't say anything. There was I've heard that because at the time in 1959, they still had capital punishment. You know, you could be hung for murder. There was no way they were going to have a white man hung for a black man's murder. Okay. So Kelso died. Up to now, his family haven't had justice. I've been involved with the Kelso Cochrane case since 2008. I had a plaque put up for him through Nubian Jack. You know our brother Nubian Jack, who does the black plaques or the blue plaques for our community, to recognize our community. I had that done in 2009 to commemorate the 50th anniversary. We do like commemorations for him. I'm in touch with the Kelso Cochrane family. We're going to do a webinar that will happen in the UK and coincide with Antigua on the 17th of May this year. Kelso's daughter lives in New York, so I'm in touch with them. The family have had no justice. They tried to slander his name. They apparently made a racist slur about him. The police are investigating it. But his murder changed the face of the area. It really did change the kind of composition. People became much more integrated and much more, you know, and also it led to the first race relations legislation in the UK. So his murder changed the face of Britain. Then there's Stephen Lawrence in 1993. Obviously, Sister Doctor knows this case very well. I don't know how much you know about Stephen Lawrence, Sister Doctor ChenziRa, but he was a young brother in Eltham. I think he was 17 at the time. 16 or 17, they were at a bus stop, attacked by a group of really violent, nasty, thuggish white boys. He was chased down. They used racist terms. They stabbed him. He died. I mean, his mother, Doreen Lawrence, is a real. She did not give up. She just fought and fought and fought for her son.
No, it's really important to say that, I think, because the images of, I think she's a dame now. Is she a dame? Yeah. They're giving her some title. And she got that title because of the resistance and because of the struggle, not because she would have chosen to be involved in anything and become a dame. This is a mother fighting for justice for the murder of her child. I think the atrocities perpetrated against African people around the world needs to be spoken about by African people around the world. I think that has been something that I've been speaking to Senate Dr. ChenziRa about, that we are being murdered wherever we are.
With impunity.
Wherever we are, and we all need to speak about this because it is shocking. It is shocking that the target of unprovoked attack and murder is us. Our biggest crime is to be melanin-rich Africans out here in the world. So I really feel that, you know, in terms of building legacy, one of the things that we have to do is to unite across the water. You know, when someone touches someone, you know, a Sandra Bland should cause an uprising everywhere.
Yeah.
You know,
That's
Stephen.
another story as well. The
Yes.
murder of our women. I mean, we need to maybe come on to that at some point. But I mean, for me, it's, you know, it's like in America they call the police the race warriors, but it's like the fact that we know the race warriors are out there looking to murder us. That's one thing that, you know, in England, America, any white dominated country, they're the beast in uniform. But to think that anyone on the streets can just murder us and get away with it as well. Any white person could take it upon themselves to just kill one of us and they'll be protected.
I
Yes.
take a moment to just, because while there are names that we don't remember and persons really got involved in, because what happened to George Floyd happened on African Liberation Day. So while many in our community were focused on our uplifting, energetic vibrations of African Liberation Day, it seems almost intentional that there was this
It was.
on a
You're
black
so
man.
generous.
I just try. Hey, I'm working on it.
I'm not that generous, I'm afraid.
Yeah,
I'm not that generous. I'm, you know, Queen. I mean, you see the systematic schooling that is happening to us so that we don't know who we are year after year after year after year right across the world. You think that's an accident? No, no, it's not an accident.
I mean, it's not happenstance.
But I just want to mention one more case as well, which only happened a couple of years ago, because this really struck me, and I want to keep mentioning this case. So we know that Stephen Lawrence, and then in 2000 there was basically an inquiry in 1998 that then found that the British police were institutionally racist, and that's like now recognized. They had a Race Relations Act in 2000, but for me, there's a case that just happened a couple of years ago in South Wales. A young boy, 14 years old, called Christopher Kapesa. And the reason this really struck me is I heard his mother, I think it was his mother or his older sister speak at the last commemoration last year for Mark Duggan. And that was another case that I was closely associated with. I was supporting the family and stuff. But Christopher Kapesa was a 14-year-old boy, and he was with some other all white boys, children. I think there might have been a girl, I don't know, in Wales. And basically, he went out with them, and the next thing the parents knew, he was found drowned. Now, Christopher couldn't swim. He was 14 years old. He wasn't a small child where he would just go jump in the water when he couldn't swim. So clearly, he didn't intentionally jump into that water. And it's suspected that those white children, they were bullying him and they pushed him in and he drowned. And the police refused to investigate it properly. Up to now, the mothers had no justice. They let the children go. They've obviously now in a situation where they've all made up their stories together. And apparently they said it wasn't in the public interest to prosecute. But if those were black boys and a white boy had been drowned, they would have kicked down the door of every family, dragged them all up, beaten them all up, haul up the granny. I mean, remember what happened on Broadwater Farm? No, in Brixton with Cherry Gross.
Yes.
They run in the house and lick down the woman. And she died, she basically was disabled. And what happened with, anyway, we know what would have happened to our people. So this little boy up to now has had no justice. He was 13 years old when that happened. Yeah. So I just wanted to point this out about the murder of our people with impunity by any white person. So white children now can kill our children this is the message that's going out, because every time one of these cases happen and there's no investigation, people just look and think, well, that's the value of Black life. It's valueless. We watch them their dead bodies in war on the TV because there's no respect for us. You never see white bodies scattered all over the place. They put our bodies dead all over the place. They allow people to kill us. And so that's how they dehumanize us and devalue us. And that is part of the narrative. And that is intentional.
Agreed.
It's not happenstance. No, it's not happenstance.
And I say it like that because there's well, bring it forward. Go right ahead.
They were looking for someone, and he had fallen asleep in his mother's room, and they were shot in her home. She was shot in her home. That woman is us.
Any one of us
is us.
I mean, if you have a son, I mean, it's a really sad thing to say, but in many ways, I was thankful that I had 2 daughters and no sons.
Isn't that sad though? Yeah. Isn't that sad that we have to say when we hear, when we've been through labor, and we want to know, is the baby okay? And then we hear that it's a daughter and it's healthy. And there's a part of us that is thankful because we know if we bring a son, what is likely to be our journey. Not necessarily that, he will have the same demise, but every time they go out, we wonder if they'll ever come home. Every time there's a knock on the door. You see, when we're building legacy, I think it's important for us to know about the great things that have happened. But one of the things that young people are doing right now is they're asking us, what did you do? They are imagining that they are the only ones having a resistance movement. They want to know, what did we do? How did you allow this to happen? And we have been having resistance. We have been demonstrating, and we have been demanding justice, and we've been doing all these things. But the quiet voice is the voice of the mother. We are mothers who have children, and when they go out, we have a fear, a deep, deep down fear that something is going to befall our children simply because they are African and they are male. And now, of course, with what's happening with women, we also have to wonder, but historically it has been a situation, but it's where it's been our men. So when we build legacy, we have to ask ourselves, what do we mean when we talk about building legacy? Are we just talking about some nice, shiny thing? I like shiny things, okay? Nice, shiny, glossy veneer? Are we talking about some infrastructure? Are we talking about some groundation? Are we talking about an awareness program with therapy? Because it's traumatizing to know all of this. Unless the world wants to continue as if we're not really people, then one has to ask the question, are we not deserving of therapy or self-repair? Are we not impacted by this stuff that has been happening to us year in and year out? When we build legacy, we have to be thinking about us knowing ourselves, us knowing we can achieve many things, us engaging in African futurism, but not just outside of ourselves. Where do we sit and how do we feel and how can we avoid being triggered? I don't want our next generation to be going along happily contributing and then somebody blindsides them because we didn't tell them about what they need to watch out for. We didn't tell them about the toxic environments. We didn't tell them about the injustice of the so-called justice system. We have to, when we're building legacy, build it on strong pillars. Let them know about the blood. Build on the blood that runs through their veins, about the possibilities, about the great, fantastic possibilities. Have you any thoughts about what building legacy means? African, well, actually, both of all of us. What I've just said what I think. I just go
echo. You were saying echo, and what I chose to do is just, there's a particular site that they've created this monument. Of course, there's so many names that are not on this site, and this is just showing unarmed Black people killed by the police
around the world.
Of course not. Of course not, because that would be a very long list, and they may not elect for us to actually go public. Like, so as you mention these names, as you refer to these cases, as you highlight that those acts that were put, those race relation acts that were put in place in UK, and we start remembering Umi in Africa, because there was a series of sisters that were raped and mutilated in the African continent, even in churches, in spaces. And this was happening around the same time as all of the Black Lives Matter activities, after George Floyd, and it created it was so frequent that after a while, persons just didn't keep the list. We would have noticed that I'm only to 2013. And this is just showing the ongoing, and it's showing who was shot, who was tasered, who was electrocuted, and things like this with Timothy Russell, 137 rounds, shot 23 times. Really? Right? And a lot of these names, many of these names there's so many names. This is a whole recitation in regards to this being a regular, consistent, intentional effort of terrorism and outright genocidal engagement directed at African people.
But let us be clear.
Yeah.
These things aren't just happening to us and we just sitting down and taking it. We are a people who resist. And I think, if anything, for me at the moment, I am really hearing our young people saying, where were you all? You know, what happened? What is happening? And where were you? And I think that part of what we have to do in terms of us leaving a legacy is to say what happened and say what we did, so that the wisdom of the elders can contribute to the fire of the young people. And we have a legacy that is building on instead of recreating, thinking everyone is the first one, you know, so open and so trusting that we are vulnerable. Sister Isis, let me, do you have any thoughts on what building legacy? These are so many names, Senate.
That's why we're gonna
painful. It's painful. It's painful. I'm gonna, in a minute, I'd like to show some of our incidents of resistance. I think I want to put that up because I want that to be registered, that we
bring it forward.
You know, but Sister Queen, you any thoughts about what building legacy means and what African futurism is? I mean, I know you do have some thoughts on this.
So building legacy is, I mean, there's so much we have to do, but I think for us here in this current space that we're in, controlling our own narrative like we are now. Media, we were talking about that. So we're all involved in media. In fact, when I met you, African Queen Mother, Dr. ChenziRa, you were already doing media. You were way ahead. I remember you were already doing stuff, and I remember thinking, wow. And then,
and she's doing stuff now.
Yeah, she continued. I meant, like, this was like many years ago, and now I'm also now doing more media stuff, and of course you, Sister Doctor, you do media stuff. You know, you do your gatherings. I mean, we're all at it now. Let's put it that way. To use an English color, we're all at it now. So yes, we need more of this. We need more media. We need more spaces where we are telling our stories and where we're calling those names, because my concern is this dehumanization, as I say, of us as Africans, where we can be murdered with impunity, our bodies can be strewn across platforms, TVs, and internet, where our women can disappear at phenomenal rates. I mean, in America, it's horrendous. It's like that's the real pandemic is the disappearance and the brutality and the violence against African women and African people. Our women just disappear. The police don't even investigate it. They don't care. I mean, I suppose that's the other thing. The people that are supposed to protect us, they were set up to enslave us. So, that's another issue. So yeah, for me, it's about us controlling our own narratives and creating our own media channels, putting out our own content, and changing that narrative. I mean, coming back to the young people, when they put out their music, whatever genre it is. I mean, in the UK, a lot of the young people are doing drill, which is quite gritty. It's very much about the lived experience of particularly young brothers are facing on, in inner city areas, where they've probably been raised in impoverished situations. They might be single parent children, maybe, they haven't had opportunities or privileges that others have had, and they're talking about their life stories, and a lot of it is harsh and rough, but that's who they are. They're expressing themselves, and obviously in America you've got all the hip-hop music and whatever, and those genres of music that are also doing that, and the young people are expressing themselves, and they're controlling media, and they're using Snapchat and Instagram and even TikTok thing, but they're putting out content, so they're seeing themselves reflected. That thing about I see you.
Right.
That's so important. We have to see each other in the way that we want to see each other, not in the way that they want us to be seen as, disempowered, dehumanized beings that are there to be appropriated and used and abused and disregarded, but actually as sovereign beings, as African people claiming our heritage and identity, pride in who we are, standing up, like you said, these acts of resistance. I'll never forget, I was at an event and Carla was speaking, and he said, look, they always want to show you, enslaved people. Why aren't they showing you why aren't they showing you when we were killing the enslavers? Why aren't they showing you white bodies being chopped up? Because that's what happened on plantations. They don't, they would almost, the white historian or historical narrative will always have you believe that we little good old Negroes, we just took it all. We never said nothing to Massa. And then Massa came along and freed us.
Academics. I have to be careful how I say this. I want to be clear. I care. I'm in a fear. Academics collude with the lie. Things are sanitized and put out there for reasons that I won't even go into right now. But there is no proper reporting unless we do the reporting. And I'm speaking about us grassroots, African Queen Mother warrior, people who are tired of burying our children. Until the hunted tell the story, the hunter will always be glorified. And it's time that it stopped. It's obscene.
That for me is one of the things in terms of building legacy. And the other thing is about claiming our identity as Africans. That is so important. Using the word African, being proud of being Africans, saying it, as Malcolm would say, making it plain, we are Africans, wherever we are in the world. In the same way in Trinidad, a Chinese woman is a Chinese woman, an Indian is an Indian. We are Africans. We are not all these other terms. And claiming that heritage of ours that is on the African continent, whether we choose to repatriate, return to Africa, or whether we acknowledge our Africanness and continue to live in another space, you know, for example, the Caribbean, which is an African diasporic country, the fact of the matter is we need to claim that African heritage. We need to connect ourselves to who we are historically, culturally, spiritually. We, you know, yeah.
That's how you build legacy. That's how you build legacy. And what we are doing is we are birthing again. We are birthing. We will always come back to birthing because it's in our DNA. And the voice of the woman, I know we're going into to March where it's going to be International Women something or the other. I want more than a day. You know, I want more than a day and I want more than a month. Can you imagine the two things are colliding? Black History Month and I mean like Women's International, whatever. I am woman.
You get 2 months.
Can you imagine?
But just imagine that what we've done though in these versations is we have established that that is what they do for the justification of a certain layer of invisibility and their limitation of understanding that women hold up more than half of the sky. Women are the birthers, the creatrixes of humanity. And to compartmentalize that into a feminine politic and overlook that ancestral womb man vibration, that's what we bring. So let them do what they do and ta-ta for now. And we move it forward in regard to what.
Let's pay attention to our business.
Yes, yes.
We're in the business of our business.
Yes.
I'm just going to take advantage and like for my 4 shows next month, I'm all going to have women from different parts of the African women from across the globe. I mean, not that I don't have brothers on my show, of course not, but like you know, why not take advantage of it?
Right. I would, and as we're getting ready to move in our next level of engagement, because we've been able to sing through our musical presentations, which is great. I just desire to share, this is something that's continuously taking place and is happening as we speak later this evening. There's been an initiative, and I need to highlight that while our brother in solidarity and struggle, Obi Egbuna II, Baba Obi Egbuna II, has put forward with a very powerful team of sisters as well as brothers, the Get Out of Cuba Way campaign and movement. They've been using these virtual platforms, again, using various networks and media from all through the Caribbean, in the African continent, in Europe, in the Americas. And even we've got some persons chiming in now from Vanuatu, West Papua New Guinea, that are this time presenting the second African and the World Thanks to Cuba. It's a cultural tribute and festival. It's all virtual. And this time they're doing it on Twitch. And you can see one of the sisters that they really bring forward is Assata Shakur, and just bringing the energy of supporting Cuba and supporting the vibrational shift of what transpired in the times of Kwame Nkrumah, you know, Fidel Castro, as well as, and I hope I didn't cover her picture, but I think part of me may have covered part of the picture of Jacqueline Kreff, along with former Prime Minister Maurice Bishop and others, you know, Marcus Garvey, you know, Angela, there's so many that are to be added to this discourse, because the Cubans have done so much to really help and partner with African people, and specifically hold up that work that is so instrumental. It's being done by our African women. And so just desire to make sure that that's something happening this evening, 6:30 Atlantic, and then it'll be happening tomorrow evening at 5:30. And persons can just go to Twitch TV, African, the world thanks Cuba. It's very simple. African, the world thanks Cuba. Because sometimes when things are happening, because these are what those artists are talking about. These artists are singing, presenting content with these wonderful cultural creative engagements to uplift what we're doing and to uplift building legacy. There are activities happening within the Universal Negro Improvement Association, African Communities League, RC 2020 that are around shifting. Like I'm so grateful that each of us have had an opportunity to see at least PG, Achille, and Nkrumah in this particular administration holds up African women and supports, even on their propaganda, African women lead. Like that is pretty hot to see that several of the organizations that are Black nationalists, etc., are holding up that and making that part of their media thrust and their action programs. And what we're saying, what we're doing, these versations, our media engagements, facilitate our ability to take what we've said from even back when we gathered in 2015 around African Queen Mother Warriors and that African women lead. So there's so many organizational pieces that come with that. The fact that the All African Women's Revolutionary Union and the All African People's Revolutionary Party celebrated 40 years, and we're still navigating some portions of how to let sisters know. Did you know there's an organization that survived 40 years in the midst of all of this, really pushing forward the liberation, unification, and social governance of African people and placing women central as we rightfully belong in those spaces? And, all these other Abaka room meetings that we know happen, we're developing a different thrust as we build legacy, because this building of legacy is shifting even that. So when we see that, we know exactly that we are here to restore truth, justice, order, reciprocity, balance, divine righteousness, and harmony. And we're doing it unapologetically and no cheek, period.
Without fear.
One more time.
Without fear.
We care.
We care.
I like
without fear.
Thanks, Brother Benjamin Zephaniah, for that one. That's like, almost need to go back and do it again.
To acknowledge him, yes. So I see that we are on the final furlong here. We have had a really, I knew it was going to be powerful. Being in the company of genuine, authentic African Queen Mother warriors, not your, your fenke, I do a little academic thing on the side, you know what I mean? For career progression, or if it look good, or if it sit down next to, take a picture with. That's not what we're about. We're about the real deal. And that's not to say there isn't room for it to happen in lots of different places. But I knew when I came to sit with fire that I would feel the heat and that there'd be some cooking going on. I said, oh, good. Sometimes we are made to cry.
Right.
I mean, we cry till we bawl, We cry till we holler and we bawl. Surely there has to be time where we can rejoice in our achievements, in our knowledge, in our collective energy, and we can laugh and we can exhale. There has to be that, otherwise there is no balance, So, Senate.
I had a small surprise, because part of our circle of African Queen Mother warriors were not able to join us this particular time. So I felt that it would be appropriate, if not, really on point, for us to share a small screen.
I thought you were going to ask African Queen Mother Warrior Isis to sing.
Yes. Okay.
You see how she responds, just nice and calm, like these two women are crazy.
While you're in preparation mode, though, I do desire to share something that's very short, but I felt that it would bring our sisters into this space. This might seem memorable to many of us.
Greetings. I am Sister Aziza, representing the 6th African region, the African diaspora. And I join with all my brothers and sisters around the world in saying no to COVID-19 testing vaccines in the DR Congo or anywhere else in the African continent. I mean, Africa is not your laboratory, and Africans are not your guinea pigs. So why test vaccines in Africa? We stand firm on this issue, and we say no. We say no to your genocide. Full stop.
I just felt that was so
I love
appropriate.
it.
I
Oh.
just felt so appropriate. I said, before we go, we need to make sure that we bring our other African Queen Mother warriors into the fold and bring them present.
You see? You see
Yeah.
what he
Woo! Look at this.
I am African Queen Mother Warrior Tempu Nefertari from the island of Barbados in the Caribbean of the African diaspora, the 6th region as designated by the African Union. I stand in solidarity with my African brothers and sisters, priests and priestesses, kings and queens, and humanitarians the world over when we say no to COVID-19 vaccine testing in any African country. We say no to vaccine testing in the Democratic Republic of Congo. We say no to vaccine testing in Senegal, in Nigeria, in Kenya, in any African country. Africa is not your laboratory. Africa is not your doormat. Africans are not chattel. Africans are not guinea pigs. They never were and they never will be, period.
And this was done last March.
Acheo.
So we were done like boom, boom. Yeah. So just so persons know, this wasn't a happenstance experience. We were always organized, clearly directed, sacred intention in the forefront as African Queen Mother warriors, speaking truth to power and taking actions whenever necessary, unapologetically and firm with laser-like precision. So we just needed to incorporate our sistren that be with us underneath.
perfect end. I think we care, we don't fear.
Yeah.
I think that is where we are, and it is magical. Magical.
Final words from our sisters. I'm very grateful to each and every one of you for just giving us an opportunity to have the Building Legacy Media platform facilitating some engagement. Those that are listening, viewing, if you have questions, share them. If you have commentary, share. And I will highlight truth, justice, order, reciprocity, balance, divine righteousness, and harmony, Ma'at. That's what we're looking for engagement. If you like to do like something different than that, then shift that to a different space. Because here, African Queen Mother warriors are at the forefront of this work and will address you most respectfully with fire, as well as air, earth, and water. Definitely much. My sister, I'm very grateful. It's always an honor and a privilege. And to our viewers, we just desire for you to join us again the second and fourth Saturdays from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. Atlantic, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. UK. All the other times in between, above and below, we encourage you to support and engage with us. And if you have commentary or questions, you should easily find either three of us. Amlak, ChenziRa, Kahina, Sandra, Richards.
We're gonna run to my people. We're gonna run to this time. You run to the rock, but the rock will not hide you. or things will be